Hey, I'm Dr. Jake Patton. I'm going to be your instructor for SHS 367 Language Science, which is also, another name for that class could be Psycholinguistics. In fact, that's the name of your textbook. And your textbook is this, Introducing Psycholinguistics by Paul Warren. You can get a hard copy of this for not too much. I think it's $30. And you can get the online version for, I think, $11. So it's not an expensive book. The other thing that's cool about this is each chapter. So let me just choose a chapter at random here. Okay, so I'm looking at chapter 3. This chapter is it goes from page 38 to 50. And that is pretty common for this book. 12-page chapters. They're really short. And you can see that the textbook is not very big at all. I mean, especially if you compare that to, this is the one that I used for 205, which is noticeably bigger in size in two different ways. So it's wider, it's got more pages. So not too bad. We'll end up reading the entire book throughout the course of the class, but 12-page chapters, so you're on the hook for 12 pages a week. It's not so bad. Sometimes 2 chapters a week, but still 24 pages. Psh, simple. You guys can do that. You've had to read way more than that in the less amount of time, so you'll be fine. You'll be totally fine. All right. So, 367. Let's talk about language science. So the first and I think most important thing to know about this is it's a podcast-based class. A lot of you guys you're all online students. I was going to say a lot of you are. That's not true. You're all online. But a lot of you are parents or you work while you're in school. And so a lot of the typical way of doing classes, in fact, if you've had some with me, you know the typical way is like, here's some videos and then you have to watch them, which is great. But it's a little bit restrictive, I think, for the lifestyle that most online students are kind of living. So I decided that what I wanted to do with this class is make it a podcast class. That way you can listen to the lectures while you're doing housework or while you're driving. If you want to slow it down to make sure you get everything, then you can with podcasts. If you want to speed it up to make sure you get everything or to listen faster, then you can. If you're trying to study for the exams, you can put it on 2 times speed and kind of listen through the podcasts again if you need to, and it's a lot quicker. I mean, you can do that with videos as well, but you have to be where you can watch it. This, you can be doing most things. You can find our class under The Psycholinguist on Castbox. Castbox is a free podcast app. You should be able to download it with an Android or Apple device. And like I said, it's free. And then you can subscribe to The Psycholinguist and get your podcasts there. You'll also have access to all of my old versions of podcasts from past classes. They haven't changed a whole lot. There's just some extra stuff every now and then. Also, if you don't want to download something or you don't have a phone that's capable of doing that and you'd like to listen online, well, first of all, you can listen online through Castbox as well on your desktop. But also, all of these lectures are going to be posted directly to Canvas, so you can listen on Canvas as well. One thing to do when you before you start listening to the podcast, take a look at the show notes if you have a chance. The show notes are just like a little paragraph of text that are that go along with each episode, and they're going to have relevant pictures for the class. It's mostly pictures that I put on there. Rarely is there anything that you need to read, because I'll just tell you that in the podcast. But occasionally there are visual things that I want you to take a look at. In fact, there's one where it's a visual thing. I want you to look at it. You're going to be like, there's nothing here. Listen to the podcast. I'll tell you what you're looking for then, and then I think you'll be able to see it if you look again later. It's cool. It's an illusion. It's fun. I think you're going to like it. So you don't have to check those before listening. I think it helps. And it's a few pictures. It should take you no time. And then there are still PowerPoint slides that go along with this. I know some people find this really helpful. They are kind of auditory learners, and so that's great. Some of you are not. And you would like sort of like a video to go along with it. You have PowerPoint slides in the class. You can bring those up, and the PowerPoint slides will be in front of you. You'll just have to advance them along with the lecture. I would urge you that, even if you are content to listen to the podcast, take a look at the lecture slides, when you're studying or something like that. What I've done is kind of maybe elucidate some points that I thought were unclear when I talk about them. So I try not to be unclear, but what I do is I add more examples in the slides. So if you're confused about a topic and I have some examples, you'll see more examples in the slides. All right. So a little bit about me. This is a picture of me, of course. That makes sense. We're talking about me. I'm not the one in the front. I was born in Mesa. If you're one of my very few online students who are actually in Arizona, you'll probably know where that is. I graduated from Hamilton, which is in Chandler. And then I went to ASU, and I have never left. I got my BS there in psychology, an MA in psychology, and a PhD in cognitive psychology, where I specialized in auditory and visual perception. That's actually how I ended up at the Speech and Hearing Sciences department, is a lot of that auditory perception work that I'd been doing during my PhD was a great fit for speech and hearing science. In fact, a lot of the old guard at SHS are psychologists. Most of these guys don't actually work there anymore, but Doctors Yost, Ingram, and that name's out of my brain. Dr. Dorman. They all got their start as cognitive psychologists. And another professor who teaches this course on ground, Dr. Azuma, she's also a cognitive psychologist. So there's a lot of us. We're around. The two fields mesh together well. And then I'm also a runner. That's a thing that I like to do. This was right before coronavirus. Me and these three guys went to this run. It was one of those obstacle runs in the mud. It was really fun. It's too bad we can't do that anymore. Maybe soon. I also do a lot of cool research. So one thing that we'll talk about more towards the end of this class is swear words. It's something that I've been looking into lately. It's really fun. Love swearing. You'll probably see that throughout the class. But there are some phonemes that we actually use at different rates in swear words than in other words. What you're looking at here, this graph in the large graph in the middle. Actually, it's the only picture on here that is a graph. So I guess I could have just said graph. The white bars are words that are not swear words. And the dark bars are swear words. And so what you're looking at is usage rates, proportion usage rates. And you can see that the a phoneme, like in bat, is used much more often in swear words than it is in just all other words. And also the phoneme. Now this graph actually is going to look like is not used more often in swear words than in other words. You can see that the dark bar is lower. So why am I saying that it's used more often? Well, this is conflating as the upside down triangle and as in schwa. And so when you separate these out, when you get rid of the schwa usage, then you see a marked difference. Most of the bar for normal language is actually taken up by schwa. There's a lot of schwa, of course. It's our kind of default sound that we make. So if you get rid of schwa, there's actually not a lot of usage of just like the stressed which is this upside down triangle kind of phoneme. But in swear words, we use it much more often. And Conversely, e and oo are hardly ever used, if at all, in swear words. But they are much more used in regular words. And in fact, when you think about like words that you use for kids or for dogs, in fact, you might be able to hear, I have a new puppy, and he's whining because I'm not with him. All the language that we use, like parentese, uses a lot of e's and oo's. So it kind of makes sense that maybe there's a separation between those phonemes. Now, we're not really saying here that, these words are constructed with this in mind. Rather, if you go back through language, what you'll see is that words start out not as swear words. In fact, think of a 4-letter word, starts with F. Totally funny to throw out at Thanksgiving. If you think about that word, it did not start as a curse word. It meant intercourse, but it wasn't necessarily, offensive. In fact, it shows up in people's names. It shows up in legal court documents. So it didn't quite have the same connotation that it does now. And over time, it's kind of fallen down. It's kind of sifted over into the swear word category. The same is true for a lot of words. Another 4-letter word means excrement. Also wasn't a swear word to begin with. Of course, that's an I phoneme, not an A. But I is in this list as well. It's a little bit more... I is favored by swear words more than other words. And poop, at one point, those two words were kind of on par with how offensive they were. And over time, the oo phoneme word has kind of shifted over to the one that we use, like, oh, I stepped in poop. It's totally fine to say at a business meeting. It would be weird to step in poop at a business meeting, but, you could say it. You might also say I stepped in excrement, I guess, depending on what kind of business meeting it is. Anyway. But maybe you wouldn't say the others, unless you were among friends at a business meeting. Again, depends on what kind of business meeting it is, I guess. And so anyway, our hypothesis is that there is kind of a feel to these different phonemes. We've analyzed, is a little bit more inharmonic than other phonemes. It tends to be more inharmonic. And our participants will choose phoneme words to mean bad things and oo phoneme words to mean good things. If we give them nonsense words and just say like, hey, which one of these is candy and which one of these is excrement? And they'll usually give to the excrement. So anyway, it seems that a word can come up, boom, new word. It comes into language somehow from somewhere. And over time, over hundreds of years, it shifts into different places. And in fact, if you look at, we're going to talk about E and now instead of and oo, but if you look at E and more E words tend to be positive and more words tend to be negative. So it seems like this is a pattern that actually holds true throughout language. If you want to read more about that, this paper will be coming out in 2021. Fingers crossed. We've got some time. It's written. We just need to submit it. Anyway, another thing that I'm working on right now is this guy down here. This is a drummer playing a dun-dun drum. And these drums are used to convey speech information everywhere, but specifically in the Yoruba language, in Africa. In Nigeria, I should say, not just in Africa. It's a huge continent. But what's really interesting about that is people who know the drum can understand what someone is drumming out on this drum. The drum can change its fundamental frequency by tightening the strings on the drum head is drawn tighter, and so it can go like boom, 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 boom. It's really cool. Like they can play it just for music, and when they do that, it kind of sounds like a drum and bass at the same time because it's got kind of this like boom, 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 boom kind of sound, which is totally cool. But when they're trying to replicate speech, they won't do so many glides. They'll kind of like just give it like a different tone. So like doom, 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 like that. And Yoruba is a language that uses tone, kind of like Mandarin. So instead of our just like ba English kind of thing, where we don't use tone to convey much, we use a little bit, mostly for intonation. But the and the don't have two different meanings, whereas this could be something that would have a different meaning in Mandarin and Yoruba and other tonal languages. Anyway, because of the tonal language, you can use this drum to convey words. It's really interesting. So what we've been looking at is micro-timing and micro-frequency characteristics and similarities between the drum and voice to actually figure out what is being replicated on the drum. Of course, fundamental frequency is being replicated, but what exactly goes into the replication? And lastly, this picture of me up here is from an article that someone wrote in Psychology Today about work that I'm doing with a couple of really interesting people. One is Dr. Mike Macbeth in the psychology department at ASU, and another is a Nobel Prize-winning physicist named Frank Wilczek, who is on part-time at ASU. And we're working on tetrachromacy. We're trying to find out more about people who have 4 color cones instead of 3 in their eyes. And that is a promising... Good things are happening with that research. So it's a fun time in the research world of Dr. Patton. Okay, let's talk about the class. We have 4 exams. The lowest one is dropped. So we're going to have 3 exams that you absolutely have to take. Each one of those is going to cover 2 or 3 weeks of the class. So you have to take these 3. First one will cover the first 2 weeks. Maybe I have it covering the first 3 because the first week is kind of short. I know some of my classes, so if you took 375 with me, the last one covers 3 because one of those sections is kind of short. The speech perception area is kind of short. I think this one, the first week, is kind of short. Anyway, you'll see it when you get in there, but one of them covers 3 weeks, the other 2 cover 2 weeks. So you'll have a test and then a test and then a test, and then there's going to be a cumulative final. The lowest grade of these 4 is dropped. And essentially what that means is if you have a really good score with the first 3 exams, you don't need to take the 4th one because it'll go in as a 0 and it'll be dropped. And you'll just get the grade on these 3 exams. But if you miss one of these, that's okay. Take the 4th one and this one will be dropped. The one that you missed will be dropped. So you'll get a grade from the other 3. The other thing is, if you're not missing any, you do all these 3, and you just want to see how you do on the last one, go ahead and take it. And the lowest one will be dropped. Maybe this will help raise your score. So you've got multiple things. Essentially, there are 4 exams. The lowest one is dropped. And that means if you get 100 on all the first 3, you don't have to take the final. There are 8 quizzes. You have 2 attempts on all those. What I want you to do is the first time go in cold. Just use the knowledge that you have in your head. So take the quiz, see how you do. These questions are going to show up again on the exams. So if you do well on the quizzes, just out of your brain like the first time through, that's great. You'll probably do really well on the exam. And if you don't do well the first time through, it's okay. You have your notes. You can use your notes the second time. I want you to use your notes the second time. Find out the answers that you missed and make a note that you need to study that part again, so then you do well on the exam. There's also various homeworks in this class, like sentence diagramming, hands-on research, and competitions with your family. I don't know why I put sentence diagramming first. Like, that's the worst one to put first. I should have buried that in the middle. There's only one time that I'll have you diagram sentences. But there is some actual, like, hands-on research that you're going to do. That's pretty fun. And then you do end up having a slang competition with your family members towards the end of class. It's pretty fun. Or friends, whatever. Anybody who you want to have this competition with. Okay. There might be extra credit for participating in research. Usually there is. Usually it just ends up being my research. Sometimes there's other researchers doing something that I can put up for our class. A lot of times it's just on ground, so that's more for, my in-person classes. But I'll have something that you guys can do at some point. There will be some sort of research that I'm collecting, or I'll have you do some sort of non-research extra credit thing. There's at least one of these, maybe two. Hey, you should check out the Disability Resource Center or SAILS for accommodations. A lot of times there are things that are going on with people that you might not even realize that you can get accommodations for. So if you have trouble with reading, or you have trouble even sometimes with listening, you should contact them. You could have dyslexia, maybe test anxiety, or auditory processing disorder. And if you have any of these, there are things that they can do for you. They're not going to cure it, of course, because if we could cure these, we would do it. But they can try to do things to help you manage the disorder, like giving you extra time on exams, although we have unlimited time on our exams, so it's okay. And other stuff, flexible deadlines and things like that. It never hurts to see. That also goes for like PTSD and other things like that. That would also fall under DRC and SAILS. So get in contact with them, no matter what's going on. Other, life events that might be happening, you might as well get in contact with them and see if there's anything they can do for you. Also get in contact with me, but it doesn't hurt to have, official stuff from DRC or SAILS. Anyway, if you don't qualify for any of these, nobody knows. So it's not like it's public knowledge. Nobody knows that you've tried to see if there's anything. So you're literally losing nothing except for a little bit of time. And if you do qualify, right, this could mean the difference for your whole career. You could learn something about yourself and then maybe take further steps to help yourself succeed. We are doing Y grades still, I think, through this semester. Like, this is the last semester that we're doing Y grades for classes that aren't like set up to be Y and N. It says that I'm not sure if this is still true, but it is. It is true. This is the last semester that we're doing Y grades. Well, it's supposed to be the last semester we're doing Y grades. Who knows? Anyway, if you want a Y, you should talk to me. There are things that you need to think about when you take a Y instead of a regular grade. Things that it might look interesting on your transcript. Sometimes it's better just to take the actual letter grade. But anyway, it's up to you. I would talk to a counselor about that. I don't know much about Y grades. I do know that occasionally when you're doing applications, they might wonder why a class that shouldn't be a Y grade has a Y grade. So, something to think about. Also, if you have more questions, email your counselor. Okay. And so then, really briefly, something that we're going to talk about, we're going to transition a little bit, and we're going to talk about science. We're all health professionals and scientists. right? Or you're like prospective health professionals and scientists. I am a PhD lecturer and researcher. You will eventually be SLPs, AUDs, PhDs, right? You're all here for one of those. And those are SLPAs and SLPs are medically adjacent professionals. It means you're working with the medical community to do other things. You're not a doctor, but you're working right alongside doctors. AUDs, you're either medically adjacent, and sometimes people consider you medical professionals. And then PhDs are scientists. We're often not medical professionals. It's okay. We don't want to do surgery. It's fine. We're not that kind of doctor. And everybody else can be a scientist too. Like, we're trained specifically how to do research. This is like the main crux of things that you learn when you get your PhD, is how to do good research and how to do good statistics and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean that the AUDs and the SLPs and the SLPAs even, and other community members can't do science too. They can be part of the research team. It all depends on expertise. So science has unfortunately been thrown into a war that, like, it didn't want to get into, right? Like, science is not, it is not political, but it seems like the American political climate is trying to make science be political, and that's true on both sides. So don't let it fall that way. Try to protect science from being political. We have a responsibility to educate ourselves on real health information and promote healthy behavior and science-based practices. It doesn't matter what side, or if any side, that any of this falls on. We just have to stick to the truth, right? That's where we are. That's what we do. And if you think about it, scientists and medical professionals and medically adjacent professionals were really the only people who really are trying to stick to the truth of all the professions that are there. Teachers as well. They are also sticking to the truth and telling these things. But, so many other things, so many other professions don't really try to find truths, universal truths, things that actually will help us understand the world and ourselves and the universe and things like that. That's really us. It's us that are doing that. So you have a responsibility to stay up on it and promote science. So anyway, of course, we're in the middle of this global health crisis, which is plagued both by anti-intellectualism and misinformation, sometimes foreign disinformation. So it makes it really tough to keep that hard line of promoting science and truth. So let's talk about some myths and bullshit. There's that swearing that I was telling you about earlier, that you might see. And now it could be thrown at you as well, because you're going to be in the sciences. So the first one here is that scientists aren't objective, or that science has a bias. Well, actually, really, if you think about it, it is true. Everyone has a bias. It's something you can't cut it out of yourself, right? Maybe there are some intellectual disorders where people can actually be without a bias. Rarely. I can think of a couple, but we don't all have that luxury. The rest of us, we have biases. It's just something that happens. We usually want our ideas to be right. It doesn't matter what it is. If we're doing science, we come up with a hypothesis. We want to be right. Everybody wants to be right. Right? But we have to be aware of that bias and then try to overcome it. There are also other safeguards that we can put in place to prevent that. One time that this has come up for me is I was investigating, I guess I should say this. So before I started working at the Speech and Hearing Sciences Department, I was a lecturer in the psychology department, and I was a data scientist for hire at like my own consulting business. I still have it. I just don't have time to do anything with it. Anyway, so I was analyzing some global gun violence data to try to help a political group make an argument. I thought it would go one way. I thought that we would see that, like, oh yeah, if you can show globally, every country, like, the more guns there are, there's more gun related deaths. This is what I thought I would find. I did not find that. I didn't find the reverse to be true either, because we're looking specifically at the United States. The United States was such an outlier in every instance. You couldn't generalize from the data. It just wasn't there. It didn't fit. And what we see is that either side of the debate uses global gun violence data to support their own positions. Some will say, like, this is true, that as there are more guns, there are more gun-related deaths, and other people analyze the same data and say that this is not true. The problem is neither of them are analyzing it correctly. Neither of them are doing it like a data scientist. They're doing it like politicians. If you do it like a data scientist, what you find is that there's one data point that you're going to want to throw out because it doesn't work, and it happens to be the United States. We cannot learn anything from global gun violence data that applies to the United States. We are a weird case. It doesn't matter what side you're on. That's not the way to solve the problem. So this is an issue where, I thought it was going to go away, but then when you actually look at the data, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And you have to just go with the truth, which is it doesn't work. So that you have to let it go. Another way that we deal with this is that science is a cycle. We're constantly revising these ideas. Like we come up with a hypothesis, we make a finding. That doesn't mean we're done. We have to come up with new ideas that look deeper into that. So we want to say, like, well, does it hold true in this other instance? Or how far can we take this? And you do these different studies and come up with new ideas. When you see, which we have in the last year, that scientists say, like, hey, don't take ibuprofen. Remember that? Like a year ago, they were saying, like, don't take ibuprofen because if you get COVID, then it actually makes it worse. Remember that? And then we figured out, oh, that's not true. And so some people spin this as like, well, the scientists don't know what they're talking about. That's not true. This is science actually working. So someone saw data that there looked like there was a correlation between people taking ibuprofen and deaths from coronavirus. So that paper comes out. We want to alert people in case this is true. Then more research is done by other teams. And what we found out was, hey, it was a false alarm. And false alarms happen all the time. It's better to be safe than sorry. I mean, that's so stupid, but it's true. And then same thing with vitamin C. We're like, hey, take vitamin C, it's going to help. And then we're like, it actually doesn't help. Same thing. Early studies looked like there was a pattern. And later studies showed it didn't do a damn thing. Zinc might. I mean, we don't know if it does jack shit for coronavirus, but zinc is actually proven to help shorten the flu. So after we're done with coronavirus and we're back to just worrying about, the typical flu, take a zinc lozenge and you'll feel better quicker. They taste weird. So, anyway, having testable and falsifiable hypotheses is the only way we can actually find real truths. Like, you can't logic your way with politics to real truths. You're not going to be able to lawyer your way to real truths because that's just based on, like, human laws. What you need is real, falsifiable, testable hypotheses that we can see if they work or not. That's how we find new truths and uncover real cool things about the universe and humans and viruses and also psycholinguistics. Another myth is that you can lie with statistics. Well, just like last time, this is actually true. But also like last time, yes, it is true, but there are so many caveats that it makes it a non-issue. There are rules to statistics. you can lie with statistics, but you can only lie with statistics to a person who doesn't know the rules for statistics. So one of these things, I think that a prereq to this is a statistics class. I'm pretty sure you have to have had that. But oh no, actually 367 is you don't have to have any prereqs. Okay, so anyway, when you do take stats, you'll see that there are two kinds of tests that you can do. You can do something called a t-test, and you can do it with either one tail or two tails. One tail is definitely frowned upon. I mean, you can do it and it exists, but basically what happens is, like, you're more likely to get a result if you do a one-tailed test than a two-tailed. It doesn't matter if you understand why they're called that, it's fine. It's just you're more likely to get a result one way than the other. It also is kind of indicative of you lying about your data or doing the test after the fact. If you're like, well, the one-tailed test shows this. This is what we think. So, yeah, you can lie with statistics, but it's not going to fly with people who know what they're talking about. So you can convince the public. You can be like, I ran this test, and look, it's significant with a one-tailed test. People who know what you're talking about would be like, well, but why the one-tailed test? That kind of makes it look like you either don't know what you're doing or you're lying to us. So there are rules to make sure that people are telling the truth. So it's hard as a person who doesn't study statistics to know, which is why you have to then seek out information from somebody who does understand what's going on. Statistical lies, like I say here, they usually work on people who don't know stats well. That's a lot of people. So be wary of any statistics that aren't published in a peer-reviewed journal. What you're looking for is peer-reviewed journals, because then you have nitpicky people like me who are going to look at the statistical test and say, like, what are you doing? And people get so pissed when we tell them this kind of stuff. We're like, well, actually, you need to redo this entire test because you used one wrong thing. You have to totally redo it. But it makes it better. It makes the whole enterprise of science better. That's why we have peer review. But the news, magazines, things on ResearchGate that are preprints, self-published books, none of these go through this peer review process. They don't have other scientists look over the data to make sure that it's right. So if you're seeing anything from those, and especially freaking memes like on Facebook and Twitter, those are usually bullshit. You have to look at peer-reviewed journals. That's the way that you know that some nitpicky, persnickety person has actually looked it over and said, like, okay, these statistics make sense. Oh, people hate us when we say that, but, you know, like I said, makes the whole thing better. And then the last myth that I want to talk about is, like, that masks don't work. I mean, by this time, when I made this for my in-person classes, this was still a thing that people were saying this. We're kind of out of this by now. I think those people have probably gotten coronavirus, so they've stopped saying this. This isn't really a thing that people think anymore, but it doesn't matter. We can talk about it anyway. Because there is a facet to this that I think is still important, that any material is better than nothing. So we did think any mask was better than no mask, but it actually seems like these gator things, and I have some that are called buffs that are really good for, like, protecting you from the sun. It actually seems like they might be worse. They might spread out the breathing particles, and they might not work very good. So if you're using one of those, you might need to switch to a different kind of mask. What we do know is that masks have varying degrees of efficiency. Here is an image of someone. It's actually it's a CPR dummy that they've put actual, like, working lungs in, and then they've pushed the air out of this mannequin with the same force that typical breathing would have. And what they're doing is they've got these fluorescent aerosol droplets that are inside the mannequin so that they can see how far this goes. What you're seeing here is that with typical breathing pressure, this breath travels over time up to 12 feet. So if you're not wearing a mask, the 6 feet rule is not enough, unfortunately. If you have these kind of, this is one of those t-shirts, which again, no, we're not really using these anymore. This was like early days of the pandemic. So you roll a t-shirt up and you put it around your ears with hair ties. That's pretty good. This gets out to about, I think, geez, what was this? About 6 inches or something like that. Out here, about 6 inches. This is the guide. This is 2 inches, this little line here. I think it ends up being 6, maybe 8. That it can go through that. And then here is a cotton face mask. And really you're looking here at like less than 2 inches away from the face that this actually will go. So you can see right here, this is the extent. So these cotton face masks are fantastic. And now they want 2 masks is a little bit better. It holds it in even more and doesn't allow it to come out. So, 2 or 1. This is a dual ply cotton mask, I think. They work pretty darn good. Okay, so anyway, those masks are pretty good. What's going on psychologically, though? This is, I think, really interesting. So we're talking about a psycholinguistics class. Let's talk about some psychology of what happens and things that you can do to push forward science as a tool, and not as a tool of politics, but as a tool of humans to better themselves no matter what their political ideology is. So one thing that we know is that there's this thing called the Ash conformity study. So people will come in and they're going to see this line. One actual participant goes into a room and the room is filled with a group of usually 3 or 4 or 5 Confederates. I don't mean like, Johnny Reb, but I mean like people who work with the researcher, but look like they're dressed like they're just participants. The actual participant thinks that they're participants, so they're like, hey man, like we're all here getting $20 for participating here. So they're asked like, hey, which line is closest to this line? And they put the actual participant as the last person who's going to answer. And so they're sitting there and they're probably thinking like C looks closest. And everybody ahead of them, all the Confederates, will say, it's B. And they're like, what? Yeah, what? B. And the next person says B, and the next person says B, and then it gets to the actual participant, and they're like, B. And this just happens over and over. After the fact, they talk to some of these participants, and some of them say like, well, I knew it was C. I said B to avoid the ostracism. I didn't want them to think I was weird. Other people actually reported like a distortion of their perception. It was actually changed. Like they actually started to see the reference line as long as B. Their perception changed, and they actually saw that reference line that you're seeing there on the left get longer and look like B. Weird, right? Very strange. There is one thing that can happen. Let's talk about, I'm going to jump down a bullet point here, but one thing that can happen in this is early on, if one of the Confederates says C, it is much more likely that the actual participant, when it comes to them, will say C. And what ends up happening is it'll go like C is what one Confederate says, and then 3 more Confederates will say B, and it gets to that other person, and they kind of look over at the first person, and they're like, C. And they like forge this bond with them. They're like, we're the only 2 that actually see it the way it is. It's C. It's kind of funny when you watch you can look up videos of this test on YouTube, and like everybody's really relieved that they have a friend in the group. They're like, yeah, we see it. Anyway, what's important is when something that you see is going wrong, right? Like people are saying like things that are not true scientifically. You don't know the actual feeling of everybody. We could have some of this Ash conformity stuff going on. You could be the one person. You could be that Confederate who says that the line is C, and then have the other people who think the same way as you go, yes, it's C. Thank God there's someone else like me here. It's C. And then you might actually change the minds of some people who've seen the line get longer and turn into B. So it's possible to kind of shut down some of this untrue stuff, to shut down some of these lies. And you can also like use those as times to teach people about the actual truth. Another thing is we've got this Milgram obedience study. This is so fascinating and fantastic is what I was trying to say there. I love the Milgram obedience study. Stanley Milgram, is one of my favorite scientists. His studies are always cool. He's the guy that came up with the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. It was not the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon yet, because I don't think Kevin Bacon was probably like just born when he came up with this. But Kevin Bacon was probably born in the 50s, so he was probably like 10 or 15 or something like that when this came up. Anyway, why am I talking about this? Oh yeah, that's a cool study. But this one, the Milgram obedience study, you've probably seen this. So participants are told to shock Confederate when they don't answer a question or they answer it incorrectly. They're not actually shocking anybody. The test is just to see if they will continue shocking these people. And they do, basically. I mean, the short answer to this is like, yeah, they just keep shocking these people because a person who looks like a researcher is telling them to. Most of them just go along with it, even if they don't want to. And they'll leave the study. It's not uncommon for people to leave the study thinking that they'd end up killing the person who was the Confederate. In fact, the research was shut down because what would happen is the guy would say like, hey, my heart feels weird. And then the the person dressed as the researcher would be like, that's not the right answer, shock him. And the person would be like, what? And they're like, you have to shock them. And so then they shock them. They stop responding. And the person who's dressed as the researcher says, well, 3 seconds if they don't answer, that's a wrong answer. You have to shock them again. And they're like, this guy's dying. They're like, it doesn't matter. That's the wrong answer. Dying is not the correct answer here, so shock them. So anyway, they leave thinking that they've killed a person, and they're like totally like freaked out by it, as you would be. And so they had to stop the research and then start telling people like, hey, he is okay. You did not kill this person. They still had people then go home and feel really terrible about themselves because they still at the moment thought the person was dead, and they're relieved that the person is not dead and that it was all an experiment, but then they've learned something about themselves that they did not want to learn, that they could have killed somebody because somebody else told them to. The only way to prevent this, to like inoculate yourself against this, is to know about the Milgram obedience study. And the same with the Ash conformity study. One of the best ways to not fall prey to it is to know about it. So once you know about this, you'll likely stick more to what you actually think is true. And once you know about the Milgram obedience study, it is less likely that you will just follow someone who seems like an authority figure, even though they might not be. So it's good to keep both of these in mind, especially as a scientist, a scientifically minded person, someone who's going to be in the science and medical community. We have to always be telling the truth. We have to always be keeping this in mind to help people. That's what we're here for. And this is one of the ways to do that, to keep pushing science forward, to keep telling people the truth. Make sure you're always telling the truth. If you had 205 with me, this goes right along with the ethics thing. It's always truth. It's always science. You just got to keep that line. So it's tough sometimes, but it's necessary. The other thing is, the last thing I think I want to talk about here is this eating the marshmallow thing. So children are given a marshmallow, and then the researcher leaves the room, and the researcher says like, hey, if you don't eat that marshmallow, I'll give you a second marshmallow when I get back. Some people eat the marshmallow. Some kids eat the marshmallow, some don't. And then they get 2, just like the researcher said. What's really crazy about this is that you can, if they've followed these children who either ate the marshmallow or waited, and kids who waited have higher SAT scores. They have higher other achievement test grades. This is in high school. They do this at like, I think 5, 6, 7, something like that. And this is like a pattern of behavior that persists forever, and they do better. They kind of learn that you can delay and get better gains at the end. And, I think you can probably guess that this has a little bit to do with what's going on, right? With pandemic type of stuff. Don't eat the marshmallow. Yeah, the marshmallow's real nice, but you got to get the vaccine. You have to wait. Then you get 2 marshmallows, right? Like if you wait and you're still alive, you get your 2 marshmallows. It's great. So anyway, keep doing what you're doing. Keep staying safe. Keep trying to get your family and friends to stay safe as well, like a good medical professional and scientist does. And then it'll be over, and we'll all get 2 marshmallows. It'll be great. All right, that's the end of this lecture, and I will see you on podcast.